being a founder and starting a company is a horrible idea. I almost lost the company $1 million. We thought we had a $1 billion total addressable market, which is like necessary to start getting venture capital funding. And they're like, actually, you have 100 million. And we're like, no way. Like, you're wrong, to the point where I had a mental breakdown and I almost dropped out of Stanford.
Welcome back to the Insights by Design podcast. We're thrilled to be joined today by Mark Freeman. Mark, how are you?
Doing excellent. And thanks so much for having me here.
We're thrilled that you could join us today. Mark is the tech lead at Gable AI. He's the founder of On the Mark Data. He's a LinkedIn learning instructor on DBT, and he's a co-author of an upcoming OReilly book on data contracts. And I will add, he's the LinkedIn meme king. Mark, we are thrilled that you could join us.
Super happy to be here.
We've been watching you closely with everything that you're doing with Gable AI, which is incredibly interesting. For those who haven't come across it, what is Gable AI?
That's a good question. So we're a startup founded by Chad, Adrian, and Daniel. And then we also have another co-founder, James, who joined a little bit later. But essentially we're a data change management platform. And so what we originally started was really focusing on this kind of architecture paradigm called data contracts, where you're able to prevent data quality issues through developer workflows upstream. But as we iterated through the product, we realized data contracts is actually not the main focus. Data contracts is just a tool to implement this larger kind of idea, which is, what does change management look like across the entire data supply chain? So a way to really grasp this data contracts relatively new is think about GitHub, but for data. And so how can we essentially each stage of the data supply chain, how can we keep people informed of what's actually used? What's the lineage of those things? What are the key requirements and dependencies? And bring the information further upstream as much as possible, especially to the engineers. So it's not things breaking in the data lake and all of a sudden you're like, what's happening? Why is everything breaking? It's already automated ahead of time to make sure that doesn't even happen.
Before we go deeper into the tech aspects, Mark, could you explain for us how you understand change management?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. So change management is, the way I think about it is that data for me, I think of it like entropy. It's always in flux, always changing, moving towards chaos, right? And if you're a data practitioner, you're very aware. You have to deal with the code itself, which is changing at a much slower rate, and then the data, which changes much faster. And so for me, many times the data is just a representation of the business. The business has a set of truth that is doing, it believes going out to the market, it'll do X, Y, Z to create value, right? And the data is supposed to reflect that and is processed through there to make sense of the world. Well, many times the truth and what is actually being captured starts to drift apart. And so you need to make updates and changes to keep things in line with that, to align with the business and make key correct decisions. And so many times people are doing that manually, or maybe not even at all, until it's a very reactive problem. They're like, hey, this dashboard's off, or hey, this ML model is wrong. And so how can you be even earlier, understand something changed in the business? I need to be aware of that change, make necessary updates down the line. And so that's what I think change management really comes down to, is how can you keep to the truth of the business as it's going along?
That's a really helpful definition. We're talking to a lot of data professionals who have been talking about change management, and that might be a concept and a skill set that some data analysts and data engineers, data governance leaders are not quite prepared for.
And I don't think necessarily prepared may not be the right word, because let me take a step back. I think they're aware, but they're not prepared for their own faults. I think many times in the business is that it's seen as a nice to have, or it's this future later problem, and it's not really invested into until it's a major problem, right? And so really, I think it's like, telling people to work out and eat healthy, right? You can tell that's a good habit, but going down the line, people don't really take it really seriously until maybe they have a health scare, right? And businesses are quite the same when it comes to data governance and data quality. And so that's many times it really requires a cultural change, similar to like behavior change, to actually get not only the individuals prepared who are actually asking for it, but the entire organization as well.
You have the unique experience of being the first employee at Gable AI. What was your journey like joining Gable and taking that leap into jumping into an untested startup?
Yeah, wow. This is actually one of my favorite jobs I've ever had. This is like a dream job to do this. So a little bit before Gable, I've always been into entrepreneurship, and I've actually tried building my own kind of venture-backed company before. I was in healthcare, right? So I was doing a pharmacy analytics AI company. Had two other co-founders. We essentially, built a product, had an MVP, was trying to get our first set of customers, and we actually applied to Y Combinator, and we actually got into our past the first round into the interviews where we actually got to talk to the team. And we didn't make it past that round. And it was it was a good learning experience, and it actually saved us probably millions of dollars because they're essentially like, we like the founding team, the product's great, but your total addressable market's way smaller than we think. We thought we had a $1 billion total addressable market, which is like necessary to start getting venture capital funding. And they're like, actually, you have 100 million. And we're like, no way. Like, you're wrong. We're not in YC, but we'll go figure it out. And so we did more user interviews, and they were like, oh my gosh, they're right. We have the wrong idea. And so we decided not to pursue the company anymore. And that was a really hard lesson of, wow, Mark, you need to do your user interviews, understand the problem way more before you start investing all this, right? And so that was my last stint. I was like, all right, let me take a break from this. Let me go deeper into the data side of things. Worked at another startup, and I started getting the itch again. And so essentially it's this problem of change management and specifically dealing with software engineers and data scientists. How can you bridge that gap and working with each other? And I was starting to create my own content, talking to other leaders. So I created a newsletter, Scaling Data Ops, where I intentionally interviewed data leaders for two things. One, to do user interviews to understand like, hey, how are you solving this problem? How are you scaling data infrastructure? But also just put them on the radar of leaders just in case they're hiring. One of the people I interviewed was Chad Sanderson. And so a month later, he hit me up. He's like, hey, I'm getting funding. I'm about to build a company around this idea. And at the same time, I was exploring the same idea to do my own user interviews. And I was like, wait, he already has funding. He's already done 300 plus user interviews, which is like the mistake I made earlier. And they've already built it before. I don't need to start my own company. I can just join them. And so once I got the offer, I literally quit my job the next week, or the next day, actually. And kind of the rest is history. So I've joined as first employee, and basically, my title says tech lead, but I'm kind of all over the place. I really don't really have a clear title. Whatever is the second most pressing problem that Chad and the founders can't get to, I go try and tackle to take it off their plate so they can think very strategically. And I just help keeping things moving and keeping problems solved.
Scaling Data Ops is a great name for a newsletter. I can see that in my head. It sounds very SEO friendly as well.
Man, completely on accident.
No, you have good instincts. But you are critical for launching Gable's product. Can you explain more about what a go-to market is?
Yeah, so go-to-market, I'll make it very clear. There are like huge go-to-market experts. There's huge marketing experts. I'm not that person, and I actually think that's my strength, because the truth is developers and data people, they hate marketing. They see vendors and they're like, absolutely not. I don't want to talk to you, right? And so I think because I come from a developer background, I more so speak to developers directly and like what problems they're solving rather than trying to like directly market to them. And so I want to make that very clear. Like, there is a whole domain expertise that I'm drawing from. And so don't conflate me with being an expert for that, right? But the way I think about go-to-market is how you bring a product and idea to the wider market and gain adoption and get your first set of customers. That's how I think go-to-market is. And the way I approach it is, I call it go-to-market engineering. And essentially is how can you use data and software engineering best practices, and basically that first principles approach of engineering towards go-to-market. And so you work backwards from your ideal goal of like, all right, to get, say for instance, we're a seed stage and we want to go to Series A. What are the key requirements by our investors for us to raise a successful Series A? What number of customers do we need? What is the average contract value, right? Various things like that, customer acquisition costs. And you take those numbers and you work backwards of how you build that. And then once you realize what those numbers you have, then you say, all right, well, then what's the system I need to implement this? And initially, you're just going to be going out in person and doing the manual work over and over and over again. That's what Chad and the founders did. They did the 300 plus user interviews. We created our first kind of pipeline of like, all right, interviews to like interest to like design partners, right? Once you have that, and because Chad has a huge audience himself and I have an audience, we have all this data on conversion rates from LinkedIn to newsletter to like email to all these things. And you can start projecting out like, I need this many customers, so I need to make this many posts. And with this many posts, I need to have this many impressions and convert this many people. And now you have all these kind of levers of information. And being data engineers ourselves, we that's like gold to us. So we're like, all right, cool. How do we optimize this? How do we build systems in place? And so I build the tooling to enable that. Did that answer your question? I kind of meandered a little bit on that.
That was great. And a big part of your go-to-market effort was writing this OReilly book on data contracts. Can you share more about the book that you're writing and what your experience has been like and what you hope readers will take away from it?
Chad and I laugh all the time whenever we meet about the book because we're so naive to think that we can build a company and write a book at the same time with our sanity. And essentially, when we were doing that go-to-market kind of strategy last year, we basically did a list of various things that we could do to help support kind of this go-to-market effort. And then we ranked them based on like ease of effort, ease of impact, and our ability to gain expertise in the space. One key thing about the book is that we don't mention Gable at all in the book, and that's very intentional. Our whole idea is if we grow the acceptance and awareness and adoption of data contracts as a whole, then people will start thinking about this problem, and then it becomes a build versus buy kind of argument. And if you want to build it yourself, great. We gave you all the instructions on how to do that in the book, right? But for us is that we just want people to start building and thinking about this deeply, and also in a way that's, again, developers hate vendors, and so you can provide information on the problem you're solving that doesn't include a vendor. OReilly is an amazing kind of partner to work with to kind of build out that information. And in addition, what's been really helpful is as we talk to more customers, as we actually build for our customers, we take that insight and experience and bring it back into the book. And then also with us synthesizing that information, now I have all this key information for our LinkedIn or Substack or other ways where I can synthesize it and bring forth these ideas. So it's like a kind of a flywheel of I create content, I get in front of people and customers, they give us more insight, and then we go back and put it into the book. And now it's like kind of self-fulfilling. And then another key aspect is that, we're able to have a partnership with OReilly where we can give our book away for free on the Gable website. And now it's a really strong lead gen form. So again, we don't really care about selling the book. We just like, take the book, read our ideas. It's just happening to you. And then in addition, we have a bunch of amazing kind of industry experts that we're friends with who gives us feedback on the book all the time to make sure it's aligned. So it's been a great experience in the sense of that it's a really challenging, fulfilling thing to write a book. And truthfully, technical books don't get you rich at all. It has to be a labor of love. And I really love this topic, and it's been really great to write about it.
As a UX person, I'm glad to hear so many UX principles that can apply to an entire enterprise, or it can apply to a specific company or a specific project, like writing a book. Listen to your users, take their feedback, and make the product better. But Mark, you haven't always been in tech. You have a robust background in community health, including a master's of science in community health and prevention. What did your journey look like moving from social sciences and healthcare to technology?
Yeah, it was completely out of nowhere. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I was very clear on that since I was like 19. I was like, I'm going to be a doctor. This is what I'm going to pursue, and specifically emergency medicine. And so I was really interested in how can you scale social impact and help people at scale. And for me, I was like, well, being a doctor in healthcare, that's the quickest way to help people. And also becoming assessed, well, as a physician, right, I can only help one person at one time. So how can I scale that? And that's what kind of brought me towards community health. And so did a lot of social impact kind of projects. So like in community college, I created like a mentorship pipeline program. In grad school, I created another program to give free lunches at clinics to youth and during the summer. Various projects like that, right? Where I'm like thinking deeply, like how do you scale impact in healthcare? And many times community health is a clear, and public health is a clear way to do that. And so leaving undergrad, my first job out of undergrad was at UC Davis, where I studied sociology, was at Stanford for the Haas Center of Public Service, where basically I was a student affairs officer, where I was helping students plan and coordinate, help them get funding for their service projects. at the university. And so basically took my previous skills of building programs myself and teaching students how to do that. And one of the students I talked to was like, I'm in a community health program and you should totally apply. And I was like, me, Stanford? No way at all. Keep in mind, my last kind of science courses, I failed all of them. And so I did not have a good GPA. And actually, I was applying to post-bac programs, which is like programs where you take additional science classes to improve your GPA. And so 2 ways to improve your chance of getting into medical school is do a post-bac or do a master's. So this person planted the seed in my head that I could do it. And I was like, all right, let me just try. Hail Mary, kind of just one application to grad school. And then while I was writing the application to my postbac program, I got an email from Stanford saying you're in. And I actually didn't believe it. I actually went to my boss. I was like, I got this fake email, or I got this like email. They sent it too early. It was like after a month. And they're like, no, this is real. And so I immediately stopped all my other applications. Like, all right, cool. We're going to Stanford. We're going to do this master's in community health and prevention research. And through that, through grad school and being at the School of Medicine, I got to see firsthand what it was like. And I realized, wow, this isn't your passion. You are not into medicine like you thought you were. And what turns out was I ended up becoming obsessed with statistics and coding. Part of my program was heavy clinical research and learning R, and then learning a lot of advanced statistics for observational studies. And I became obsessed. Like, all my free time outside of school was like learning statistics, going to the professor, making sure my master's thesis was all around statistics, and I ended up loving it. And I realized, oh wow, there's this thing called data science and tech. Being in Silicon Valley at Stanford, I can do this. And so I can do healthcare data science and really solve these large, complex problems at scale and help people. And that's what kind of brought me into data science. And it wasn't a clear jump from like grad school to data science. I worked in operations in a health insurance company beforehand and took a second job doing data analytics until I finally got my first data science job.
I love that. And you've taken bold moves in your career and, like quitting your comfy data engineering job to join another untested startup. What drives you to make these bold moves, and what advice would you give to others who are considering taking a similar leap in their career?
Yeah. So I think the big thing for me is I like working on problems that feel impossible. I want to see a problem and just feel overwhelmed by just the scale of it. And then the process of taking this overwhelming thing and breaking it down to individual parts and then walking along that line is just extremely gratifying for me. I've always kind of had like an entrepreneurial kind of mindset, whether it's community-based programs or even my own kind of work, which on the market data, which I have, right? And so for me, after a while of doing this and like seeing businesses, trying out startups, I've gone from like D to C to B and now A and then now seed, right? You start seeing patterns of like, what will a successful team look like? What is a problem worth pursuing? And essentially, in a way, you kind of approach it as a way an investor thinks about ideas. And so for me, choosing to work with Gable wasn't risky for me. I actually quit my job and they offered me the job, but I didn't have a contract because the company didn't exist yet and didn't have their funding. So there was like a 1 month lag time, which is actually what I told my parents this. They're like, you did what? You don't even have the contract yet and you quit your job in this economy, right? And I was like, it's going to be okay. I actually flew up to Seattle where they're based and met them. I was like, this is a great team. So kind of the key things you want to look for is the founding team. How has the founding team worked with each other before? Have they worked with each other before? At Gable, they all worked at Convoy together on the same team. And they obviously liked each other enough to start build a company themselves and build it outside of work as well. And then once they finally quit, go full time into it, right? So that's one key thing. The second thing is like, what's the problem? Is it something that's really felt by a huge pain? And I felt that pain exactly. The problem they're solving for was the problem I wanted to solve. I was actually looking to try to create a company around it. So I already believed in the problem, but also Chad did an excellent job of creating a lot of content for like a year ahead of time. So it was very clear that other people feel the problem. And he did those 300 user interviews. So he talked to like the large big tech company, FANG companies, all the way to startups to like traditional companies. And essentially I saw that list of all the people he talked to, all the notes he has. I was like, I know they understand the problem. So even if data contracts may be the wrong idea, they understand the problem so well that they can pivot to wherever solving the problem is, wherever the solution is, right? It's not about the solution, it's about understanding the problem deeply. And then finally, for me, it was, I don't think so apply to most people, but being a founder and starting a company is a horrible idea. It is very hard. It's very lonely, very stressful, and you're gonna be broke. And you basically have paper wealth. Your stocks are basically worth a lot of money, but it doesn't mean anything until you get an exit, right? And so that's a really hard life. And I wanted to de-risk that situation. And so coming in as the first employee allows me to essentially have an employee salary and get paid pretty well for what I do, but still get the founder experience. And so I can see and make a decision for myself after Gable, after we exit, success, that's what we're going for. What do I want to do? And the three options I really have is try to start my own venture-backed company, go into venture capital, or dive full in on the mark data and really try to scale the solopreneur thing out. And so this is helping me make that decision and learn all these lessons of how to scale and grow a company on essentially someone else's dime. And it's been really great. And that's why I say it's a dream role, because now I really get to live out this kind of founder fantasy without the risk of being a founder. And I've been learning so much.
So across these major career moves, you've had to continuously learn new skills: sociology, data analytics, data science, data engineering, marketing and sales, and probably so much more. How do you stay up to date with the latest developments in data engineering and technology? And what resources do you recommend for others looking to learn?
Yeah, I would say you have to stay curious and build in a way that like stokes that curiosity and makes things fun. So, I'm not going to say like you have to be passionate about your job and love it and make it your life. Like that's not it. That's actually bad. What you should be doing is, what is fun for you and how can you tie fun to these other things where you can have fun and also learn to grow other areas of your life. And so for me, content has been something that's been extremely helpful for me to stay up to date. I love creating content. I love teaching others. It's a passion of mine. And going through the process of like taking something complex and distilling into information that you can spread widely. And there's a kind of a theme here. I love helping people at scale. And that process in itself is just super fun. Right now it's data. Maybe in the future it might be like, I don't know, underwater basket weaving, something random. But the process of teaching is really fun for me. And right now I'm really focused on data. And so for me, I create this amazing content. And through that, I'm able to learn so much through that. A current project I'm working on is I'm trying to create a open source project called Sonnet Scripts, where you essentially have end-to-end data pipelines from ingestion to serving to data lakes to transactional databases, all within a local Docker container or Docker Compose that anyone can run, right? And so that process in itself, I'm basically building a data stack that anyone can use. And that's like sharpening my engineering skills. Like, all right, how do I create my own Docker Compose image? How do I create or Docker container? How do I use Docker Compose? Okay, what's a open source version of a data lake? How do I make it small enough to fit on a local machine, right? How do I make a product that other people can use beyond just me? And that to me is super fun because it's not tied to any work. It's just me following my curiosity of data. And from there, through that process of building, that's how I'm learning. So I think the key thing is stay curious, make it fun, and then just try to push yourself to do something new.
Considering how hot it's been out here in the West, underwater basket weaving sounds like a great hobby. I might have to take that one up myself.
Amazing. Yeah, it's we were just talking earlier how it's like 110 where I'm at. And y'all are in Arizona where it's always that hot.
Yep, no mercy.
And Mark, you've shared some of the highlights and lessons from over your career. And in retrospect, your career appears to be an unhindered, happy, easy journey into a wonderful startup. But we know that there's usually more behind the curtains. Have you faced any significant setbacks or failures in your career? And how did you handle them? And what did you learn?
Yeah, I think I'll answer with two of them. The one's a personal one, which I think is what I think a lot more people can relate to, and then one's gonna be a professional one. But they both along the kind of were key junction points in me actually growing in my career. And so the first one is, being accepted into Stanford was a huge thing. I remember when I called my mom didn't go to college, and neither did my dad. They didn't graduate. So when I told them, like, hey, I got Stanford, they were like, you just changed the trajectory of our family, right? Which was like, wow. Thanks, mom, for like, and parents for like investing me in that. But that was a really intense experience, and it pushed me to the point where I had a mental breakdown, and I almost dropped out of Stanford because I just couldn't take the pressure anymore, and I had some undiagnosed mental health issues that I'm very open about on social media that that I just never really took care of. And so essentially is, either you take care of yourself or your body will force you to take care of yourself. And I was in a situation of being forced to take care of myself. And so I was just shattered and not a person that I really recognize anymore. And from that kind of dark hole, I really had to build myself back up. So I, did the therapy, talked to family, and just worked on myself for years. And that's why actually out of grad school, I took like an entry level job because I was like, didn't have the confidence anymore to pursue anything. And I just have to slowly build that confidence piece by piece and build up my buffers and build up the good habits. Am I eating well? Am I sleeping enough? Am I taking my medication, right? Am I exercising regularly, right? And so for me, the first part of my career is really focused on not necessarily accelerating my career, but building myself back up, building up my mental health, and now building up my physical health. And from there, I can build the capacity to actually grow my career. So that was like kind of the first big setback that really I almost didn't even pursue anything. I just almost gave up, right? So I think it's okay to get to a point where, it's okay not to be okay. And just know that there is light at the end of the tunnel when you have those hardships in your life. And just to keep on taking one step at a time. And what that really taught me through there was, wow, I really thought I was at the end of it, and I pushed through, and anything beyond that is much easier. Hard day at work, whatever. At least it wasn't like that back when I was in grad school, right? Or, I made a mistake at work, right? That's small compared to the other things I've dealt with, right? So it gives you another perspective and appreciation for life. And I'm happy to go more into that if that's something of interest, but there's other podcasts where I've kind of talked about that. So maybe for a different time. And then for the second one was my first data science job. I was laid off kind of 6 months into it. And I had a really hard kind of time because I had a manager that didn't believe in me or support me. They would actively fix my mistakes behind my back and not tell me everything was okay. And then tell other people around me that I was making all these mistakes. So I couldn't learn. Actively telling me that they wanted to fire me, but it's not their decision, right? And so for that time, I was working like 80-hour weeks trying to prove this person wrong. And I gained the acceptance of everyone to the point where they couldn't fire me. They had to lay me off. And so I got a nice severance package from that and laid off. But from there, I essentially was like, maybe I'm not cut out for data. Like, I did this data science job. It didn't go well. I'm going to try one more time. And from there, if it doesn't go well, then maybe I do a different career. Right. And one of those key mistakes I made, which was a hard lesson, was I almost lost the company $1 million because I made a mistake about how I analyzed the data. And the sales team presented to this customer, and it was wrong. Right. That's why I think I'm obsessed with data quality now, because I got burned from that experience, and now I'm obsessed with like, how do you solve this, right? But that was one of the key drivers that led to me being laid off, and me being laid off was actually a really good thing because it allowed me to take a step back and be like, all right, Mark, you can become a data scientist. You got the job. What type of career do you really want? And for me, it was like, I want to put ML models in production, or I want to do software engineering, like put data and put things where people actually use this instead of doing analytics. And that's how I got my first job my job at Humu, which is another startup. And I had an amazing manager that actually believed in me and supported my career goals and put me in positions to actually grow. And I went from this person who was thinking maybe I'm not cut out to it to I am an expert at what I do. And I'm very confident in what I do. I can solve business problems with data. And really shout out to Stephanie Tigner, who was my manager at that time, who really built me up during that time.
So Mark, you've done a beautiful job of explaining how important it is to take care of yourself, because you can have all the money in the world, all the career opportunities in the world, but if you don't have your health and if you don't have your sanity, what do you really have at the end of the day? How do you manage to prioritize your health and well-being when work is stressful and demanding?
I'm still trying to figure that one out, and working at a startup does not help that at all. And I think for me, it really goes down to kind of like, and thinking about like prevention, right? Is that I think there's kind of like three layers to it. Is one, doing the habits that will make sure you have that buffer. The second one is like, all right, you're seeing the symptoms of you not doing too well. And the third one is like, you are doing horribly. You need to pump the brakes and you need to actually go take care of yourself, right? And so I'm thinking about that tiered approach. What I've learned that works best for me is one, having my support system. So my biggest support is my wife. She is amazing. She makes sure that I take care of myself. She sees things before I do, and forces me to take care of myself. So that's a huge thing. But also having close friends that I can speak to and making time to spend time with, and also being around family. So I recently moved back to my hometown. Big part of it was being closer to family, because this is something that really helps out a lot with my mental health. And so thinking about like, what do I do to make sure that I'm okay? So consistently going to therapy is a huge one. Taking my medication is a huge one. That's bare minimum. The next stage is, am I eating right? Am I eating enough, right? If you're depressed or having mental health issues, you may not be eating at all. And then the next day you're like, why am I so tired? It was because you haven't eaten in 3 days, right? So that eat, drink water, and then exercise has been the biggest one that I've been focused on for the past year. I can tell, like, if I didn't do my walk, if I didn't do my weightlifting, I feel sluggish. And during that time, when you're weightlifting, you can't think about anything else except getting that bar over your face. And so it's a nice break from the mental thing. So that's kind of like the prevention side of things. But the reality is, like, life can throw curveballs at you. And essentially, it's like, even if you do all the healthy stuff, you can still have a hard time. And so seeing those signs of like, oh, wow, I haven't been sleeping well in the past 3 days. I have an Oura ring that helps track my sleep. Like, I should get around 7 hours. I've been getting like 4 or 5. Mark, you need to change something in your schedule. Yeah, you want to work because you have this big deadline, but you need to sleep so you can work better next day. So a big part of it is you don't need to work yourself into the ground. You need to think about, how do you build up your capacity to work? How do you build up your capacity to have things to do outside of work as well? So essentially, it's how can you fill your cup and build up the cup even bigger? And then finally, kind of that third stage is like when things hit the fan. When you deal with mental health, that's bound to happen regardless. You can't be super happy every single day. You're going to have down days. You're going to have really bad days. And recognizing that, it's just temporary. It's only a day, maybe a week, maybe a little bit longer if you're having a really bad time, right? But have a plan. What do you need to do? All right, I need to fully decompress. I need to take a day off work. I need to go read a book that makes me happy. I need to make sure I have a good meal. Maybe I need to go see family for a little bit. Whatever is your key thing to help you calm down and become okay and build space for you to actually start taking care of yourself again, that's what you need to do. And it's just a job. Your health's way more important. Whatever, tell them you're out. Take care of yourself.
Avoiding family, I think, would be my go-to stress relief.
Hey,
That's also very valid. That is very valid.
Michael and I are next door neighbors, not on purpose.
Family can be anyone. Doesn't have to be by blood.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, one of the things you've been able to do outside of your day-to-day job is that you have a highly rated LinkedIn learning course on data engineering using DBT. I'm in the middle of taking it, and you're a very good instructor. What did you learn from making an online course that has influenced the way that you make content?
I think actually, creating courses, that's not something new. I think the big takeaway I got from working with LinkedIn was that, wow, it's really nice to have a lot of the editing and video stuff outsourced. And I only have to worry about the content itself. But it actually just felt like an extension of what I'm already doing. So actually, in that job I was actually laid off from. That's how I learned how I love teaching. Unfortunately, they had me train all my replacements. And essentially, I created all these tutorials on how to use PySpark. I created all these tutorials on how to do SQL, all these different things where it was very in-depth with videos and like written guides. And then I taught and did all these trainings for entire data science org. And through that, I was like, wait, this is fun. I love this. I'm learning so much. And basically, that's what I just did for my content moving forward. And so for me, the way I approached kind of the DBT course was actually like I had my repo, my GitHub kind of account. I started with a blank page, and then on one of the things I had a markdown file, and I basically built a project from scratch, which I've done before at a previous company. So I was like, let me just do this again, and I'm just going to document everything in this markdown file with screenshots of what I did for that. So that way it feels like you're building with me. That was the whole intention, is like you try to place and write in the kind of vein that you're the vibe that you're trying to be in, right? And so if I'm trying to do a lecture, right, I'll be doing a deck. But because I want it hands-on and people learning by coding, I was like, I have to document what this process is for me. What were the stumbling blocks I had? What were the errors I were facing, so I can bring that up into the course? And it was kind of funny when I went to LinkedIn, they're like, wait, you don't have any scripts? I was like, no, that's not how I work. If I have a script, I'll sound robotic. And basically that whole course was completely like freestyled. I had essentially my markdown file, my instructions of building it, and what you got was in the moment of me just speaking and just being excited about it. And the reason why I do that is because I don't want to sound robotic. I don't want to sound like I'm teaching you. I literally want you to feel as if I'm right next to you, and that's how natural it feels. And that's kind of how I approach content.
Yeah, shout out to improv. You can't script everything. So as a GTM leader, you have to stay ahead of the curve. What trends do you see emerging in data and technology in your space?
Yeah. So, definitely the one's data contracts, right? I represent Gable, so I have to say that. But I think data contracts part of a bigger kind of thing. Is that one key thing that I'm seeing is the role of metadata, and how metadata is moving from being something that's collected and be like, this is how things connect within the business. This is the data. This is the data catalog, right? To now, like, we have this metadata. How can we automate these processes with that metadata? And so I wrote a recent article talking about how Apache Iceberg and data contracts can be used to create self-healing data pipelines. And the big thing I see with that is like for metadata, Apache Iceberg, and I think Andrew Rodriguez. So you're probably well versed in this, right? But Apache Iceberg essentially using the metadata to organize and find information within the data lake to optimize it, right? Same thing for data contracts, is using metadata to understand what's important and automating the checks and balances throughout the process. You know, we've seen this before, SQL, PySpark, the execution plan, right? They're using metadata to automate these things, right? And so I think it's moving away from something that is just like part of a simple language to now being part of infrastructure itself. And I think the future kind of data trends is that, especially with kind of the big push for generative AI and all these things like that, is how can we optimize metadata to do all the tasks that are just really not fun for us, right? We've seen things like Fivetran and other ETL tools where they automated this thing of like data pipelines that was like a same pattern that people were kind of tired of doing, right? I see that expanding to other aspects of it. What aspects it will be, I can't necessarily say right now because I think it's too early, but the fact that I think this framework change of like, we need to figure out how to build for this type of problem to now like, we need to build a system that can kind of self-regulate itself, looking at the metadata rather than the data itself. That sounds very ambiguous. I can happy to dive in more about that, but that's kind of a trend I'm seeing. And maybe you can like link the article that I have that goes way into more depth about that.
We'd be happy to. Yeah, at Dremio, we've been incredibly happy with all the press that metadata and Iceberg and catalogs have gotten, where they've kind of been more of a fringe topic before, but now that Databricks and Snowflake have jumped into the fray, we're only benefiting. So we're incredibly excited about that. We're like, yay, Iceberg's popular. We've been talking about it for 5 years.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Iceberg. I think it's a really cool project. When I first learned about it, I was like, wait, we're not already doing this for data lake? So yeah, I'm a big advocate for Iceberg.
And that's why we're good partners. I love it. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us. For those who want to learn more, where can they find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just Mark Freeman II. Click follow. If you want to connect, I accept every single connection. If you want to chat, happy to. On LinkedIn Learning, you'll find my DBT course, and I'm currently creating a data quality course as well. And then in addition, I'm on Substack. So Scaling Data Ops is my own newsletter. And then for Chad's newsletter, I write there pretty often, which is data products. And then finally, our O'Reilly book's coming out on data contracts. And you can get it early access from the O'Reilly website. But if you want it for free, you can go to the Gable website, so Gable AI, and then you'll see a link at the top to go download the book for free.
We love free, and I can't wait to read it. Mark, thank you so much. It's been incredibly interesting, and we look forward to hopefully a round 2.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.